Millionaire CEO didn't know he was a father until he saw his ex-wife with twins children just like him. Hey there, welcome. You're about to dive into a story full of love, betrayal, and heartache. Jaxon, a millionaire CEO who had everything. But here's the twist. You won't see it coming, loses it all. And the woman he once broke is the key to everything. But there's so much more you'll want to know. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single moment of this journey. So let me ask you, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let's see how far this story is reaching. Jaxon Cole wasn't just a name in the business world, he was a phenomenon. He walked into boardrooms like a storm, left deals signed with the pressure of his stare, and crushed competitors with the flick of a contract. Born into nothing and built from grit, his billion-dollar empire stood tall in the heart of Manhattan, shimmering like the crown jewel of ambition. His mansion overlooked the city skyline, a glass fortress that knew no warmth, just like the man who lived in it. At 30 he had more power than men twice his age and more charm than most could manage in a lifetime. His tailored suits cost more than some people's salaries. His watches ticked with the weight of legacy. And his name, Jaxon Cole, was synonymous with success, scandal, and silence. He didn't believe in love, not because he hadn't been exposed to it, but because he saw it as a trap, a soft, emotional weakness that distracted men from greatness. Relationships to him were transactions, and women were luxuries like his cars, sleek, temporary, replaceable. The world saw him as the golden boy. But behind the media smiles was a man walled off by cynicism, haunted by a childhood where his mother cried alone and his father slammed doors instead of saying goodbye. He taught himself never to depend on anyone, never to be vulnerable, and never, under any circumstance, to fall in love. Intimacy was a game he played well, but only to win, not to feel. He could wine, dine, and charm any woman he wanted, then walk away with a smirk and no guilt. He wasn't heartless. He was just armored, layered in mistrust and pride. Every morning, he passed the coffee shop on the ground floor of his glass tower, barely noticing the staff inside. Until one day, on an unusually quiet morning, he walked in himself, irritated that his assistant was late. Craving caffeine and silence, that's when he saw her. The woman behind the counter wasn't dressed in anything remarkable. Just a simple uniform and a name tag. But there was something about her, something calm in her eyes that didn't flinch at his presence. She looked up with a natural smile, the kind that didn't try to impress. Her voice was soft but confident when she asked for his order. And in that fleeting moment, Jaxon, who never stuttered, never hesitated, forgot what he came in for. Her skin glowed like polished mahogany under the shop's warm lights. Her curls tied up in a way that framed her face perfectly, and her eyes held stories he couldn't read, but desperately wanted to. He gave his name at the counter out of habit, expecting recognition, expecting her to react like every other woman did, wide-eyed, giggling, impressed, but she didn't. She just nodded, scribbled it on the cup, and moved on to the next customer. Jaxon was stunned. Not insulted, fascinated. For the first time in years, a woman had looked at him like he was just a man, not a brand, not a trophy. And that slight wound to his ego didn't hurt. It thrilled him. He watched her work, the way she moved with purpose and grace, treating every customer like they mattered. Her kindness wasn't a performance. It was who she was. He returned the next day, and the next, always pretending it was for the coffee, but always watching her. He tried to start conversations, light and clever, but she kept it professional, polite, distant, and that only drew him in more. For a man used to controlling everything, her refusal to be easily swayed became his newest obsession. He didn't understand it, but he felt it. The ache in his chest when she laughed with co-workers. The way his eyes searched for her when she wasn't at the counter, the restless energy he felt at night thinking about her face. It scared him, it made him angry, and it made him curious in a way he hadn't been since his first million. He started skipping meetings, walking down just to catch a glimpse of her. He sent his assistant away more often. He sat near the window, pretending to check emails while stealing glances. And still, she stayed the same, graceful, unaffected, distant. He didn't know her name yet, but she was already in his head, unraveling walls he didn't even know existed. Jaxon Cole, the man who didn't believe in love, had just met the one woman who might teach him what it meant to feel. Selena Monroe moved through life like a quiet sunrise, soft, steady, and unbothered by the noise of the world. She didn't wear designer clothes or paint herself with false charm. Her elegance came from the way she listened, the way she remembered little things about people, the way her laughter wrapped around a room without demanding attention. Jaxon couldn't stop watching her, not because she tried to be seen, but because she existed in a way that made everything around her feel a little more alive. She didn't flirt back when he complimented her. She simply smiled, like someone who had heard flattery before and didn't need it to feel valued. When he asked her name, she told him casually, like she wasn't speaking to one of the richest men in the city. He asked what she did outside work, expecting a story he could twist into conversation, but she surprised him. "I paint," she said. "Not for money, just to feel still." It was the first time Jaxon felt envious of peace. He kept coming back, asking more questions, offering her little moments that would have made any other woman melt. Expensive coffee runs, offhanded jokes about his schedule, the kind of attention women often begged him for. But she remained grounded, never leaning in. She didn't want to be rescued. She wasn't broken. That unsettled him more than any business risk ever had. So he changed his tactic. He became thoughtful. He listened. He asked about her art, her favorite music, what made her stay up at night. And to his surprise, she answered. Not because he was charming, but because she slowly began to believe there might be something more behind the man in the suit. And Jaxon, confused by his own motives, told himself he was still in control, that this was just another challenge. But when she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and smiled shyly over a joke he'd made, something shifted. His heartbeat lost its rhythm. He began timing his mornings to hers, learning which days she worked, memorizing her coffee order, pretending it was coincidence when they met at the crosswalk. One rainy Thursday, he offered her his umbrella. She declined, soaked in laughter. He walked with her anyway, his $1,000 shoes ruined, and he didn't care. That night, he lay in bed thinking not about meetings or mergers, but about the water drops clinging to her eyelashes, and how he had wanted to kiss her then, not out of desire, but wonder. The next day, he confessed something soft. "You make me forget everything else." And for the first time in years, he meant it. Selena didn't respond with butterflies or dramatic emotion. She simply looked at him with searching eyes and said, "Why me?" That question haunted him. He didn't know. Maybe it was her warmth. Maybe it was the way she saw through his charm and made him want to be better. Maybe it was because she never needed him to be rich to see he was lonely. Jaxon told her he loved her. And though he didn't understand the full weight of that word, he said it like it was oxygen. Selena paused. Then she smiled, timidly, nervously, beautifully, and said it back. It wasn't a grand declaration. It was a quiet beginning. She started letting him in, slowly, carefully. They went for walks in the park, where she sketched while he tried not to check his phone. She taught him how to slow down. He made her laugh with awkward honesty, admitting he didn't know how to cook or fold fitted sheets. He bought her sunflowers when he remembered her saying roses were cliché. He watched her paint once, silent, mesmerized, as colors bloomed across her canvas, each brushstroke more expressive than any word he could say. She didn't fall for the money. She fell for the moments when he forgot he had any. Their first kiss wasn't under chandeliers or on a yacht. It was outside the coffee shop, on a windy afternoon, where he cupped her face like she was something precious, something he didn't want to break. And for a while, he believed he could be the man she saw in him. But underneath that growing bond, a shadow remained. Because Jaxon still didn't know the difference between obsession and love, and Selena, trusting with all her heart, didn't see the fault line beneath their feet. She thought she'd found someone who finally wanted her for who she was. He thought he'd won a game he never understood. And as their story deepened, untruth lingered in the air between them like unsaid words. Not all love begins as real, but sometimes it can still change everything. The days turned golden, the nights deeper, as Jaxon and Selena slipped into a whirlwind. Romance that felt too enchanted to question. He began to live for her smiles, for the way her eyes lit up when he showed her a world she'd never tasted. He flew her to Beverly Hills in his private jet, hand in hand through luxury boutiques, where he insisted she try on silk dresses and glittering heels, laughing as she protested they were too expensive. He said she made every thread look priceless. She blushed, unsure how to exist in this new universe he pulled her into, one draped in opulence and fast cars, champagne and rooftop dinners. But it wasn't the riches that made her heart race. It was the way he looked at her, like she was his anchor. Their first night together was a symphony of anticipation, wrapped in the soft jazz that floated through the penthouse suite, towering above Los Angeles. Candles flickered in the corners, casting golden shadows across her face as she stood by the window. Nervous but glowing, Jaxon approached slowly, not with his usual charm, but with a reverent stillness. He brushed his fingers along her collarbone, tucked a curl behind her ear, and whispered that she was the most breathtaking thing he'd ever seen. As he leaned in, his lips grazed her shoulder with reverence, not hunger. That night, they didn't just share a bed, they shared laughter between kisses, dreams murmured into warm skin, silent promises in every tender touch. She melted into him heart first, believing every soft word he breathed into her ear. He held her like she was fragile, as if breaking her would shatter something in himself. When morning light streamed through the windows, painting their tangled limbs in gold, she thought just maybe this was real. But real love isn't proven in luxury. A week later, he took her to a snow-covered cabin in Big Bear, tucked away from the world. The silence of the woods wrapped around them like a secret. Inside, the fire crackled low while she stood near it, cheeks pink from the cold, wrapped in a wool sweater he had bought for her. Jaxon moved toward her, drawing her close beneath a thick blanket, his hands tracing her chilled fingers before lifting them to his lips. Her breath caught, not from the heat, but the way he looked at her, like she was a story he wanted to write with his touch. Outside, snow fell silently, but inside, her heart beat loud against his chest. They kissed, slowly at first, then deeply, losing time between gasps and glances. Her hands clutched the back of his neck, his fingers threading through her curls, their rhythm sinking like a song only they could hear. She gave herself to him, not just her body, but her secrets, her fears, her hopes. She told him about the nights she cried alone, about the dream of opening a small art gallery, about her mother's prayers. And he listened, nodded, said all the right things. He touched her like she was sacred, but behind his eyes there lingered an emptiness she didn't yet see. When their bodies finally quieted and the fire dimmed, she rested her head on his chest and whispered, "I've never felt this safe." He tightened his arm around her, pressing a kiss to her temple. But the truth was far more fragile, for while Selena had given her soul that night, wrapped in warmth and blind belief, Jaxon gave only an illusion, the best version of himself that he could fake. He didn't know why he lied with his hands, why he said forever when he meant nothing more than now. Maybe part of him wished he could be the man she believed in. Maybe he thought love was something he could act his way into. But as the fire turned to ash and the snow thickened outside, a quiet crack had already begun in the foundation. They'd built one she wouldn't feel until later, and one he wouldn't admit until it was too late. For her, those nights were everything. For him, they were borrowed moments dressed as truth, the days following their magical nights, the ones when she felt safe and loved in his arms, seemed like a distant dream. Selena had believed in him, believed in them so completely that when Jaxon proposed, It was like a whirlwind of everything she had ever wanted. She didn't hesitate, didn't question. The diamond sparkled on her finger, but it was the promise in his eyes that meant more than any stone. Their wedding was intimate, just close friends, no extravagant crowd. And for the first time, Selina felt like the fairy tale she had always imagined was unfolding right before her. She smiled at him as they exchanged vows, thinking this was the beginning of forever. He kissed her lips softly, with the kind of tenderness that made her believe they were untouchable, that love was enough to bind them forever. But in the weeks that followed, the magic faded like morning fog. She noticed the small signs at first, his distracted glances, his eyes that seemed to drift away from hers, as though his thoughts were elsewhere. She brushed it off, chalked it up to stress, but deep down, the cracks were forming. Then, a month into their marriage, the laughter that had once filled their moments together became distant, lost in the hollow silence that grew between them. She tried to fill it, tried to make him smile, the way he once had, but the effort felt like pushing against a wall. He wasn't the man she had married. He was a stranger, cold and distant. Her heart tightened, but she pushed forward, determined to fix what was broken. She began to plan dinners, organize trips, buy little gifts, thinking that if she could just make things right, he would remember the love they shared. But instead of warmth, all she received was indifference. The man who once told her she was his world now avoided her gaze, turned away from her touch. And then, without warning, on a quiet evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, he dropped the bomb. He said it bluntly, without hesitation. "I don't love you." His voice was empty, void of any emotion, just cold, like a final declaration of defeat. There were no apologies, no soft words to cushion the blow. No explanation, no remorse, just the words that shattered her entire world. Selina's heart collapsed in her chest. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She didn't hear the rest of what he said. She only heard the echo of those words, "I don't love you," repeating over and over in her mind. She begged him, her voice trembling with desperation, her hands clutching at his jacket as if holding him would stop the inevitable. "Please," she whispered, "please don't leave me. We can fix this. I can fix this, just stay." But he stood there emotionless, unmoved by her tears, her cries, her heartbreak. His face was a mask of indifference. The man she had loved and trusted so deeply was now a stranger in front of her. He didn't flinch, didn't pause. He just turned away and walked out, his footsteps echoing in the hallway, each step further away from the life they had built together. The door slammed behind him, and Selina crumpled to the floor, her sobs the only sound in the empty room. She felt as though the world had crumbled beneath her feet, as though she had been swallowed whole by the grief and confusion that overwhelmed her. She cried until she couldn't cry anymore, screamed until her throat was raw, but he was gone. He left her shattered, a hollow shell of the woman who had once believed in love. The promises they had made were now meaningless words, discarded like they had never mattered. And as the hours turned into days, Selina was left alone in their empty apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a life that had once felt so perfect. She didn't understand. How could he say he loved her and then walk away without even looking back? How could he be the man who once held her and promised her forever, and now be the one who discarded her without a second thought? The questions haunted her, gnawed at her from the inside, but there were no answers. Only silence, only pain, only the ache of a broken heart that she couldn't repair. Not on her own. Her dreams had been shattered. The fairy tale she had believed in was nothing more than an illusion, a fantasy that never truly existed. And as the reality of his departure settled in, Selina was left to pick up the pieces of her broken heart, unsure if she could ever love again or if she even wanted to. Time passed, but the wound Jaxon had left behind never fully healed. Selina disappeared from his life, retreating into the shadows of a city, far from the man who had once promised her the world. She moved to Phoenix, Arizona, seeking anonymity in the quiet rhythms of a new life, away from the echoes of his betrayal. The bustling streets and unfamiliar faces offered a strange comfort, as though she could erase the past by simply walking away from it. She found a job at a small tuck shop, the kind that blended into the background of every neighborhood, where she could keep her head down and her heart locked away. Life was simpler there, quieter, but even in the silence, her heart ached in the spaces where memories of Jaxon lingered, like whispers she could never escape. Yet amidst the quiet ache, something unexpected blossomed within her, something that would change everything. When she first discovered she was pregnant, fear gripped her. How could she raise a child alone? Would Jaxon even care? But the answer was simple. She would do it by herself, just as she had been forced to rebuild her life alone. She had no choice but to carry this secret, to protect it like a fragile flame against the winds of uncertainty. 9 months later, on a night when the stars above Phoenix seemed to shine just for her, she gave birth to twin boys, Liam and Logan. The pain of labor was nothing compared to the surge of love she felt when she first held them in her arms. They were perfect, small, fragile yet strong, with soft brown hair, and their most striking feature, Jaxon's piercing grey eyes, the same eyes that had once captivated her, that had once made her believe in something that now seemed impossible. Her heart twisted with love and loss as she looked into their eyes, knowing they were a piece of him. She had no doubt they were his, but she would never tell them. They would never know the truth of their father. She could never explain to them the betrayal, the pain, the love that had been so real and yet so hollow. For now, all she had to offer them was herself, and she would give them everything. Selena raised them alone, every day a battle between hope and fear. There were no child support checks, no apologies, no letters, nothing from Jaxon, just a silent void where he used to be, a silence she filled with love for her sons, and a fierce promise to protect them from the pain of a world that had broken her. She was their mother, their protector, and no one would hurt them, not like she had been hurt. Every day was a challenge, but it was one she met with determination. She worked hard to provide for them, making sure they never lacked for anything, even if it meant putting her own needs last. She never spoke of their father, never let them ask about him, though she could see the curiosity in their eyes as they grew older. They never knew the truth. They didn't need to. She couldn't bear to tell them that their father had been the one who had walked away, who had left them without a second thought. Instead, she painted their world with love, with laughter, with warmth, giving them everything she could while silently carrying the weight of her past. There were nights when the loneliness overwhelmed her, when the emptiness of raising them on her own seemed too much to bear. She would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind swirling with thoughts of Jaxon, of what might have been. But she knew there was no turning back. The man who had once promised her forever was gone, and all that remained were the twin boys who, despite it all, filled her life with meaning. They were her reason to keep going, her reason to stay strong. Selena never expected the love she had for her sons to fill the empty spaces Jaxon had left behind. She never expected that one day she would see the world through their innocent eyes and realize that, no matter how much she had lost, she had gained something so much greater. For as much as she had been broken by the past, the future was still unwritten. And in that future, her sons would always have her, always have the quiet strength that came from the love she had given them, and the love they had given her in return. They were everything. 5 years had passed since Selena had left the chaos of Jaxon's world behind, and in that time, she had learned to build a life that was hers alone. But fate had a way of twisting paths when least expected. Jaxon, who had spent the years since their separation burying himself in work, found himself traveling to Phoenix for a tech conference. The city held no personal significance to him, just another stop on his endless rounds of business engagements. He parked his luxury car outside the meeting hall, the sleek black vehicle gleaming under the hot Arizona sun, unaware of the quiet ripple of destiny already in motion. Inside the conference, he was consumed with deals and new opportunities, pushing aside thoughts of anything personal. The world outside was moving at its own pace, and he was disconnected from it. Meanwhile, a little boy, no older than 6 or 7, was playing nearby with a hockey puck, the kind of carefree activity that children do without a second thought. He swung the puck with uncontained energy, his small hands missing the goal. In that moment, fate took its turn. The puck flew into the air, crashing into the side window of Jaxon's luxury car with a sharp, violent crack. The glass shattered instantly, the sound slicing through the air. Outside, the boy froze, eyes wide, realizing the mistake he'd made. His innocent game had inadvertently caused a wave of chaos. When Jaxon came out of the conference hall, the first thing he noticed was the damage to his car. His chest tightened and anger surged through him. He stormed over, his heels clicking sharply against the pavement. Who did this? His voice cut through the air like a whip, demanding an answer. A man nearby, who had witnessed the incident, pointed carelessly toward the boy. "Some kid," he said, uninterested in the drama unfolding. Jaxon's fury flared up, and without thinking, he marched toward the child, his frustration clouding his judgment. Without warning, he kicked the boy lightly from behind, sending him stumbling forward. The boy's confusion was immediate. He turned around, eyes wide, ready to react, but then their gazes locked. Time seemed to freeze. His eyes, his face, the way he stood there. Everything about the child screamed him. The same piercing gray eyes, the same mischievous smirk that Jaxon had once worn so proudly, were reflected in the child's features. Jaxon's breath hitched, his heart pounding in his chest as his mind scrambled to comprehend what he was seeing. The boy's innocent voice broke through the haze of shock. "Why'd you do that, mister?" he asked, genuinely confused, his small brow furrowing in an expression that mirrored Jaxon's own. But then the boy did something that stopped Jaxon's heart altogether. "Mom, Mom!" he called, his voice filled with urgency. From behind a nearby corner, a familiar figure appeared, and Jaxon's world tilted on its axis. There she was, Selena, his ex-wife, the woman he had left, the woman whose heart he had broken without a second thought. But it wasn't just Selena standing there. Holding her hand was another boy, identical to the first. The same light skin, the same brown hair, the same gray eyes. His heart skipped a beat as he stared at the twins, unable to comprehend the depth of what was happening. His legs felt weak, his mind racing with the sudden realization that these children, were his. He had walked away from them 5 years ago, never knowing they existed, never imagining they would be a part of him. But here they were, standing before him, the living proof of everything he had lost. The silence between them was deafening, the weight of the moment too much to bear. Selena's face was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes as she approached, the same quiet strength he had always admired. "Jaxon," she said softly, her voice cool, yet there was an undercurrent of something deeper, something buried beneath the surface. Jaxon opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was a man of control, of power, but in this moment he felt powerless. The realization that he had fathered 2 children, twins, and had never known them, never been there. For them was a blow he hadn't prepared for. He had betrayed Selena, abandoned her, and now, standing face to face with the product of that betrayal, he felt like a stranger in his own life. His hands trembled as he reached out, unsure of what to say or how to act. The boy who had first caught his attention, Liam, he thought, was staring at him, his face still a mixture of confusion and curiosity. The other boy, Logan, was clinging to Selena's side, his eyes cautiously watching Jaxon as if trying to figure out who this stranger was. And there was Selena, so beautiful, so strong, and yet so broken in ways Jaxon could never have imagined. She had raised them alone, without him, without any of the support he should have given. And now here he was, standing on the edge of a life he could never reclaim. A flood of emotions overwhelmed him, guilt, regret, longing, all crashing down at once. He didn't know what he was supposed to do, but one thing was clear: he wanted a second chance. He wanted to be the father he should have been, to make things right, to fix the mess he had made. But the question was, would Selina let him? Would she ever forgive him for the pain he had caused, for walking away without looking back? Jaxon stood motionless, his entire world spinning on its axis. His heart pounded against his chest as he stared at Selina, the woman he had once loved and then ruthlessly discarded. She stood before him, calm yet resolute, her eyes holding a depth of emotion he couldn't fully comprehend. And there, standing between them, were his sons, twin boys who looked so much like him, yet so much more than he had ever imagined. His mouth went dry as he finally found the courage to speak, his voice cracking with emotion. "Selina, are they mine?" His words hung in the air like a desperate plea, a question that had been tormenting him since the moment he laid eyes on them. Selina didn't answer with words. Instead, her eyes, soft and sorrowful, spoke volumes. She had never spoken about them. She had never let him know. Her silence was enough. Her eyes told the whole story. Jaxon's body trembled as the weight of the truth settled in. He had missed everything. The first steps, the first words, the sleepless nights, the birthdays. He had never been there. And now, standing in front of him, were the sons he didn't deserve. Sons he had never known existed. Sons who were the product of a love he had once tossed aside so carelessly. Overcome by emotion, Jaxon dropped to his knees. His tears fell freely now, unchecked. He reached for Liam, then Logan, pulling them close, as though holding them could somehow make up for everything he had lost. "I didn't know," he whispered brokenly. "I was cruel. I was blind. Please, let me fix this. Please." His voice was raw, each word an echo of the regret that gnawed at his insides. Selina stood there, her body stiff, torn between the love she had once held for him and the years of hurt he had caused. The silence stretched between them, suffocating and thick, and for a moment, Jaxon feared she would walk away again, just like she had before. But then, as if guided by a force beyond them both, Liam reached out, grabbing Selina's hand, and Logan, with the simplicity only a child could possess, wrapped his arms around Jaxon. His small, innocent arms were a balm to the raw wound in Jaxon's chest. The touch, the connection, it was everything Jaxon had longed for and yet feared he would never have. "I missed so much," Jaxon whispered, his words soft but laden with pain. "I missed so much of you both. Let me earn your forgiveness. Let me be the father you deserve." Selina's breath hitched. She had thought about this moment 1,000 times, how it might feel if he ever came back, if he ever showed the slightest sign of regret. She had imagined it, dreamed of it, but reality was so much more complicated than any dream. Still, as she looked at the man before her, she saw something different. Not the Jaxon who had broken her heart, but a man who had been shattered by his own mistakes. A man who had come to understand the depth of the hurt he had caused. He wasn't the same, not in the ways that mattered. But could she ever forgive him? Could she let him back in? Could she allow him to be the father her sons needed, even though the years had already stolen so much? She gazed into his eyes, and for the first time in years, she saw a glimmer of hope. Not the same hope she had once placed in him, but a new kind of hope, one that grew out of the ashes of their past. "I won't forget," she said, her voice low but steady. The words stung, but they weren't meant to punish. They were simply the truth. "I won't forget the hurt, the betrayal, the things you did that scarred me." Jaxon's heart sank, but he didn't flinch. He was prepared for this, for the weight of the past to be thrown at him, because he knew it had to be said. "But maybe," Selina continued, her eyes softening just slightly, "maybe we can try again. For them." She nodded toward Liam and Logan, who were still holding on to both of them, their innocent faces full of hope and trust. Jaxon's breath caught in his throat as her words sank in. He had lost so much, But here before him was a chance to gain something back. Not everything, but something precious, something irreplaceable. His sons. The thought of being their father, really being there for them, was enough to make his heart swell with emotion. He had been blind before, but now he saw the truth in their eyes, in the way they held him, in the way Selena still stood before him, not with bitterness, but with cautious hope. He wiped away his tears, his hands trembling as he looked into Selena's eyes once more. He had broken her, and yet here she was, offering him a chance, a fragile, uncertain chance to make things right. He didn't deserve it. He didn't deserve any of it, but he would fight for it. For them, for his family. And in that moment, a slow, cautious love, once buried deep beneath layers of betrayal and regret, found its way back home. It wasn't the love they had once shared, and it might never be the same. But it was enough. It was the beginning of something new, and that was all Jaxon could ask for.